Hello, you're watching the Vietnam News Agency's Daily Bulletin, and now the headlines. Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng chairs a meeting on impacts from China's devaluation of yuan. Domestic economics put forth solutions to reduce trade deficit. Hàng chồng folk paintings on display in Hanoi. Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng has chaired a meeting with relevant ministries, sectors and agencies to look at the possible impacts of the Chinese yuan's devaluation on Vietnam's economy. Participants agreed that China's move has immediately affected the exchange rate, the foreign currency market and the stock market, with both advantages and challenges expected for the domestic economy in the time ahead. The State Bank's response by widening the trade band of Vietnamese dong US dollar from ±1% to ±2% on August 11 was considered a timely and suitable move, taking into account factors impacting the financial and monetary markets, trade and investment, and ensuring the overall interests of the economy. The forex market showed signs of stabilizing, while the interbank US dollar Vietnam dong exchange rate dropped below the ceiling on August 14. The Prime Minister required the ministries and agencies to continue keeping a close watch of the domestic, regional and global situations. He also asked them to assess impacts on each field, especially the forex, stock and gold markets, import-export, investment, payment balance, public debt and economic growth. He said relevant ministries and sectors must enhance coordination to take appropriate countermeasures to global monetary changes so as to minimize adverse impacts on the Vietnamese economy. The Prime Minister also told them to steer monetary and exchange rate policies in an active and flexible fashion and in line with the market, helping to ensure the macroeconomy and the stability of the domestic currency. After 3 consecutive years of trade surpluses, Vietnam is set to see a trade gap of $6 billion this year due to its record deficit observed in the first 6 months. Given this, domestic economists have put forth solutions during separate interviews granted to our reporters. Vietnam ran up a record trade gap of $3.7 billion in the first half of this year, accounting for 4.8% of the country's total trade turnover. The country recorded a trade deficit of only $0.58 billion in the first months of 2012, which climbed to nearly $1 billion in 2013. Meanwhile, the trade surplus was reported at $1.9 billion in the first half of 2014. According to the Ministry of Planning and Investment, the trade deficit in the first 6 months of this year pulled the country's GDP down by 3.7 percentage points. The deficit also hindered the implementation of the 6.2% GDP growth target set for 2015 by the National Assembly, as it inched towards 5%.
The trade deficit has a negative influence on the international balance of payment and exchange rates in the domestic market, affecting national economic growth. As such, it is urgent to enact measures to narrow the trade gap in the remaining months of this year and in the years to come.
Imported components and materials were 2 factors driving the trade turnover into a deficit in the reviewed period. Specifically, import materials shipped to Vietnam held a large proportion of the country's total import turnover, with 28.5% share, while imported consumer goods accounted for 37% of the total.
Materials and components imported into Vietnam in the first 6 months mainly serve the production of FDI enterprises. I do not think this is worrying.
While the FDI enterprise sector has constantly enjoyed trade surpluses, the domestic business sector has frequently suffered from trade deficits. Hoi also attributed the trade deficit to the poor performance of domestic enterprises. the operation of a number of domestically invested enterprises reaches only 40% of their maximum capacity. Notably, although Vietnam is one of the major garment and textile exporters around the world, domestic businesses operating in the field outsource some 70% of their products. Domestic companies should take the initiative to renovate equipment and improve laborer professional skills, Khôi said, emphasizing that enhancing material production is significant to lowering the trade deficit.
We have to boost the development of supporting industries to ensure input materials for production because this helps reduce imports of materials and components.
Vietnam has enjoyed trade surpluses from its key exports to some markets such as the US, the EU and Japan. It yet still incurred a trade gap due to its huge import to Chinese products. Khôi urged specific policies for each overseas market to regulate trade balances. The northern mountainous province of Tuyên Quang is known as the cradle of the Vietnamese Revolution. Boasting many historical sites, the province is now taking measures to take full of its advantages to promote tourism, hence turning itself a safe, friendly and quality tourist destination. Accordingly, the province will strengthen tourism linkages with provinces and cities in the region and the whole country. It will invest in restoring and preserving cultural relics and heritages to serve tourism purposes. The province will also encourage enterprises to pour investment in the tourism sector through offering incentives. Since the beginning of August, the Tân Chào National Historical Relic Site, one of the most favorite tourism destinations in the province, has welcomed over 50,000 domestic and international tourists, up 20,000 compared to the previous month. On some days, the daily number of visitors reached a peak of more than 4,000 visitors. The Tân Chào National Relic Site spans over 2,500 hectares in 10 communes in Sơn Dương and Yên Sơn districts. It combines a total of 177 sites, 40 of which are recognized as National Historical Relic Sites by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. In recent years, the province has poured over 4.7 billion Vietnam dong, or $215,000 into restoring and upgrading special works, including the Tân Chào House and Hồng Thái House. According to statistics, Tuyên Quang has attracted 908,000 visitors since the beginning of this year, earning 828 billion Vietnam dong, or $37.5 million. Out of the 18,000 artifacts currently residing in the Vietnam Fine Arts Museum in Hanoi, the Hàng Chống folk paintings stand out the most, embedding both a sense of familiarity and foreignness that carve themselves in the hearts of the viewers.
Alongside other famous folk art genres such as Kim Hoàng and Đồng Hồ, Hàng Chống paintings are colored with the nostalgia of an old Hanoi. Yet the cruelty of war and the restlessness of history have made most people forget the once famous art form. Hàng Chống paintings were produced in the old quarter of Hanoi, particularly during the Tết holiday, where artists would bring their work out to sell in Hàng Chống streets' communal houses, hence the name.
The paintings originated in the 17th century. They used to be hand-drawn, but the increasing demand led to mass printing. People all over the country would come to buy the paintings.
Artisan Lê Đình Nghiên inherited the craft from his family when he was just a child, and since then he has devoted his life to preserving the old art form. The old artist has a collection of 30 wood-carved painting blocks to show for his 40 years of dedication. Each Hàng Chống painting uses a half hand-drawn and half-printed technique. Firstly, the original carving is printed onto gió paper, using fine Chinese ink. Then, depending on the size of the piece, the artist will need to use 2 to 3 layers of papers. Once the glue is dried, they can proceed with the coloring, which requires a special technique of its own. Considering its complexity, Nguyen spends at least several weeks on a single painting, especially for a commission without an original block. But if you ask the old artist, he would tell you that it is the meticulous work that demands so much care and patience that has made him the artisan he is now. According to Nguyen, there is one downside to having to carry the torch of an old and difficult art, and that is to pass it down to the next generation. The Hang Chong paintings still reside in a quiet corner in the old quarter, persisting despite the changes of time, thanks to artisans like Lê Đình Nghiên, and it is with hope that the people look towards a future where the traditional art lives on.
The Go-To ethnic minority in central Quảng province are proud of their visual arts and consider it an indispensable part of their lives. Yet the arts are falling in oblivion. The provincial authorities are facing difficulties in preserving and upholding the traditional visual arts. The visual arts show the exquisite talent and skillfulness of the Go-To ethnic people. The artisans' products are essential decoration in villages and are often used in traditional festivals. The Go-To people use wood to carve their products. Artisans create a statue of the gods, a person, a bird, or an animal by stylizing simple lines. The task, however, is very complicated and requires careful training and practice. This worries artisan Yi Kong, who has spent a long time studying the Go-To culture.
I wish I could transfer the capture techniques to the youth in order to preserve our cultural identity. The most common feature in Go-To ethnic people's visual arts is the simplicity and the spontaneity. The architecture and graphic design are always combined. Apart from tomb sculptures like the Central Highlanders, the Go-To people also have visual arts.
The visual arts of the Go-To people have their own characteristics in creating and carving from the skillful combination of sharpening, shaping, and coloring. The relievers with images of animals, hunting men, dancing women, or buffalo heads have their own legends and explanation belonging to the ethnic people's beliefs and religion. The outstanding feature in their visual arts is the wooden mask, reflecting the people's aspiration of a good life triumphing against evil. However, their spiritual culture has been eroded over time.
The arts are maintained just by word of mouth, not through an official teaching class. Preserving the visual arts is an urgent task, which is included in the ethnic people's cultural preservation and development project. There are many ways to preserve and uphold the visual arts, such as supporting local residents to build communal houses for artisans to create artwork. Competitions should be organized for artisans, studies on visual arts should be implemented, and pictorial books on the arts should be published.
Restoring the visual arts is also a way to preserve and uphold the traditional cultural values of the country's ethnic minority groups. And that's the end of our bulletin. Thank you for watching and see you next time.